Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And Joanne Soinke with For Better For Worse.
Let us know you're out there. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a little more delicate subject that we all, as dog owners, have to deal with at one time or another, and sometimes more often, those of us who have multiple dogs, more often than not. Tonight, we have Dr. Kari Trotsky with us, and she is the owner and operator of Peaceful Endings. And what that is, it's basically helping our dogs transition over the Rainbow Bridge. Hi, Ronnie. And one of the topics that I think is important for us to discuss and talk about it, no matter how hard it is, because we're all going to have to do it or have done it already. And sometimes making those difficult decisions, it's nice to talk about it and kind of prepare as we work with our dogs when they're alive and all that. We want to also make their transition as peaceful and as good as we can make that situation. So welcome, Kari. Thank you for coming, for doing this with us. So let me ask you, and I know we talked a little bit beforehand, but how did you get started in doing this type of work?
Well, I've been a vet for about 23 years now. It's been a while. And I remember hearing about someone doing this, and I thought to myself, why would anyone ever want to do that? And so fast forward several years, and I was working for a corporate practice. I was chief of staff, and over the years, it got to be more about the money than the pets. And I got burnt out of clinical practice. I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I quit, and I didn't have anything lined up. It was summer, so I just took the summer off. And finally, I felt better, and I didn't know what to do next. So my friend told me about an ER job and also a position that does this type of work. So I chose this type, and I thought it'd be temporary. But as I did it, I realized it was a niche that people needed, people wanted. And despite them calling me and doing what I do, they were always so grateful for me to have been there. I come to the home, and it's so much better for people, I think. So I started doing with another company in 2011, and then I started my business in 2013 and have been growing every year since.
Yes, I know you're really, really, really busy because it is it's a difficult job. You have to, when you go to the people's homes and helping them in that really difficult time, it must be difficult when you're, like you said, you're almost crying yourself and trying to comfort those people. So one of my questions I have, and I think, because sometimes we don't know when is a good time. Do you find people wait too long or too soon? I mean, what do you, in your experience?
Sorry, my dogs are thinking it's playtime right now. I think that's the $1,000,000 question. Everyone has so much concern and worry about picking the right time. And it's really, really difficult for a lot of people. Some people, it kind of comes naturally and they say, oh, you know when it's time. But not everyone knows it's time. It really depends on everyone's past experiences with pets, their belief system. Sometimes religion comes into it. Sometimes they hear from other family members or friends that it's time and they don't necessarily agree. Sometimes they just can't let go because they're too emotionally invested. Maybe they haven't even lost a person that's close to them, let alone a pet who they see every day and who basically we treat them like kids in a sense. We feed them and take care of them and make sure they're protected. So I think it's a really difficult thing, and all those factors come into play. So if someone asks me what I thought, it's really difficult to answer. For me, I'm a veterinarian, obviously. So I'm able to make split-second decisions on medications and why I'm using them and what I could do better. And I can get the medications easily. I can change them 12 hours later based on what I see. I can get diagnostics pretty easily and cheaply. And I know what to expect and what disease course is going on. And I've done this before, so I know, how it's done. And so it's hard for me to answer because not everyone has that experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's part of what we do, actually. We do quality of life assessments, and we go into the home and we can go over records and examine the pet and give our opinion on, how we feel. Just our opinion is basically giving you more information to make the decision on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody called you and you got there and you felt like there's so much more we can explore here, I mean, you'd share that with them and
So that could be tricky, and I've done that before. The decision is really hard to make, and so we kind of do a screen, like we just kind of screen them when they call to make sure it's a condition that kind of warrants it. And if we have a problem with it, then we don't want to come out and be there. But it's such a difficult decision that some people have like lines in the sand where they don't want to go past a certain step. Like I had someone whose golden retriever had mobility problems, and his line in the sand was he did not want to use a harness at all. That I don't know exactly why, but he did not want to go that route. And he wanted to make sure that this dog went out on top versus the other pets who passed. Maybe they thought they waited too long, so they didn't want to make the same mistake in their mind. And also their previous Goldens only lived to like 6 or 7, and this one was 11. So they thought that they got all those bonus years. So it can be a difficult thing to decide. And everyone, like I said, everyone's experiences are different.
So Tim was asking, is there a scale or quality of life chart? Because I've heard of that where you kind of helps people make a decision on that. I don't know.
Yeah, there's several out there. I can't think of the certain ones off the top of my head. It's through a university and through another veterinarian who does my type of work. She created one, and the scale goes along certain things like, is your pet keeping up with like nutritional needs? Is your pet getting enough sleep? Some conditions can make it hard to sleep. Is your pet able to get around okay without pain? And some people regarding pain say, well, my pet's not crying out, so I don't think they're painful. But if you think about it, if we limp, we're sore, but we're not going to keep saying ouch every step. We just kind of get along with it. But if we weren't in some sort of pain or discomfort, we wouldn't be limping. So same for the pets. And in my definition of being in pain includes being nauseous, because I know that's a horrible feeling when I experience it, like not feeling well from a certain disease like cancer. So those types of things go into my definition of pain. It's not just like a sharp pain that goes away, or musculoskeletal pain that we can see as pets age with arthritis. It encompasses a whole lot more.
Right. Well, yeah, because especially with cancer, you don't always, since dogs can't tell us, they just tell us by, maybe not wanting to eat, or we have to look for those signs that our pets are not doing well or whatever. Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. And because I in my experience, I've had some clients that in my opinion, like you said, everybody has their own experience, waited a little bit too long, and the dog had to go through a lot of, it was a lot more pain and a lot more discomfort than I would have probably allowed my dog to go through, right? Because it's like, It's a quality of life thing for me. So because I think a lot, in me, and I don't know, maybe in the dog world, the dog sport world, that we see more people waiting a little too long than too early.
Yeah, it can be, but also you get a lot of people who are more experienced with owning multiple pets throughout the years, and sometimes they're more in tune with that. I feel like making the decision is more of a gray zone versus a single date or time. And doing it a little bit early on or doing it a little bit later on is the same. It depends on how you feel about it and what's going on with the pet. I think waiting too long for certain conditions like heart and lung issues, those can make my job harder because I can't give them the best transition just by nature. They're struggling to breathe, and I can't get them to the point where we're all calm and sit, relaxing around. There's a urgency to it, and there's a suddenness to if, as a sedation kind of works, and we're waiting for that, the breathing pattern changes, and now they're not getting enough air, and then I have to step in sooner. So those are times I wish people wouldn't wait, but some people just don't know, like they're just don't have the knowledge to know that, or some people just hang on too long because maybe they lost a spouse and this was the spouse's pet and stuff like that. They want to, they can't bear to lose this pet anymore because of the state they're in emotionally. So that's an issue too.
So this is a kind of a tough question. In that final moment, right, when you're giving your final injection, in my personal experience, I have found when dogs are truly ready, it happens much faster than it does for a dog who might, still be holding on and you're making a decision based on pain or something like that. Is that sort of your experience, those that are really ready, they just sort of, everything lets go really quick?
That can be. I can definitely go along with that. I have had pets not pass quickly, and I tell the client to kind of just tell them it's okay to go. And within a minute, they pass. I think the pets want us to be okay too, and hold on for us and worry for us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, right? Because you're in that place, and they, and I always laugh because I always tell my dogs, you got to stay with me forever, and it's like, and they're like, so, but it's true. It's like you have to let them know that it's okay to, that you're okay.
You're really crying and just wanting them, and they protected you all their lives. I think it happens that way.
Yeah, they have that connection. So yeah, it's tough. What was my other question? I had another one. So do you find that I had one client that did have a dog pass on and didn't want another dog. I mean, I know they talk, when you go to they never wanted to do that anymore. Like that pain was so great for that particular person that they made a decision not to love like that again, right? Are there people that maybe might say that when that happens, or?
Yeah, I do have some people say that, and I try to, because obviously they have to grieve after the pet. You're not just going to get it. I mean, some people that find that comforting to get another pet right away. So I won't say that it's never the case. A lot of times they need to grieve first, but I just remind them of all the joy that pet brought them, all those years, all those days. And you're describing one day of their passing and just remembering that one day versus all the days in the year of joy. So sometimes people say that, but they don't really mean it, and they're dog people, and they're going to go get another dog to love, and it's not going to replace that dog in their hearts. The heart's big enough to accept all of them. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, really hard to lose a pet, especially for me. I grieve like I lost a human, but they do bring me joy. And I think the pets do want us to be happy, and they understand if we get another pet. I know I'm kind of speaking for the pet a lot, but these are kind of my ideas created over the years.
Yeah. I have to say, yeah, because the pain is pretty great. When you do lose them, it's, yeah, you grieve them just like you would a person, especially, those of us that, not that it's any less if you don't do those things, but it's such a different bond when you do things with the dog and you spend a lot of time. It's just, there's something different about it, because I've been on both sides of that, right? I've been on where my dogs were just pets, and it was very painful too, but it was even increased much more when I started doing dog sports. With losing those dogs have been a lot more difficult, right? For me anyway. And then I know, Tony, I do too, so I try not to think about it. And here we're doing a whole show about it. But anyway, it's one of those things that they do bring you they add so much to your life that it's worth going through the pain again. And that's the way I kind of see it, right?
That's how I feel.
Yeah, they add so much to your life that I'd go to you go, every time.
Yeah.
So go ahead,
Tim wants to know, how do you support your clients before the visit? Like, do you have a pre-selected place where it's going to happen? Aftercare, like, do you refer them to, anywhere for grief support type of stuff?
So for where it happens, I just go to people's homes, because that's where the pets are most comfortable. They're not scared. They don't have to travel, especially if they're nauseous or arthritic or just hate the vet. They hate the car, stuff like that. Although I have been in situations where I've euthanized pets at their favorite place, and that happened to be the forest preserve or a park. So we do that also. We try to I have client liaisons who talk with clients, set everything up, and go over all of their needs and explain the process. And when we get there, we explain the process again, especially if there's other people there. And afterwards, we can take the pet if desired. We work with a crematory, or you can handle that part yourself. And we also, for people who need it, we do this online group supports. There used to be in-person grief supports, but because of COVID, that's not as prominent. I actually even have listing for a therapist who specializes in pet grief, because you could get someone who maybe a therapist who's never owned a pet, not really understand the grief that you're going through. So there's also books to read and things like that. So each person finds different things comforting. Some people need to have a celebration of life memorial afterwards, or even kind of during the procedure or the day of, where all the friends come and visit the pet and they stay there, and there's a slideshow of all the funny things the pet did throughout its life. And there's crying, but there's also laughter when they remember the pet jumped up and ate the whole turkey on Thanksgiving, things like that. It's a difficult thing, but celebrating the pet's life, I think, has worked the best for people to get past that.
So Stephanie has a really good question, because I've been there, done that. She said, any advice because when you have a physical decline, not that it's easier, but the dog is physically declining and he's not able to get along. So it's almost simpler to make those choices versus a dog that is in physically good condition for their age, but is mentally having a lot of decline. Just similar to like our Alzheimer's or so how and I know, it depends, but when because it's difficult, it's easier to put God, I hate to say it this way, but it's easier to hi Athena. It is easier to make a decision when the dog is physically having a difficult time versus mental, right? So was asking like what do you do with the dog who's 14 and a half that's having more senior moments, but physically is in okay condition?
Well, there's cognitive dysfunction is what we call Alzheimer's in pets. Basically, I've actually had to euthanize some pets with just that condition because sometimes the anxiety was so high and just the levels of different activities that the pet does. A lot of times you'll see excess pacing. They're not really trying to get anywhere, but the brain is telling them to keep walking. Sometimes they'll get stuck in corners and not know how to get out, or they'll just stare into space, and we don't exactly know what they're thinking, but it must be a form of suffering in that sense, because if you just extrapolate to how people feel, not really knowing who you are or where you're at or why you're doing something, that can definitely be distressing. Along with that, I also find people whose dogs say it's a really big dog that can't get up anymore. So there's literally no options. It's a big dog. You can't carry it around. It's in pain, soiling on itself. But the dog's mentally there. People have a difficult time because the body's worn out, not the dog's spirit. So those two contrast each other. And sometimes you need a professional to explain what's happening, especially with old age things. Some people think a dog just moving slowly is just getting up there in age, when actually the dog's in pain from arthritis in the hips, and we can give an anti-inflammatory and the dog could at least feel better. A large part of hospice in pets, of which I also do, is pain management. That's the biggest thing, because we don't want to have a pet in pain. But there's also environmental things to think about too, like is there a ton of stairs out the back that the pet has to go to get downstairs into the yard, versus just a couple steps in the front, and just raising the food and water bowls and putting mats down or carpet runners, like little paths around the house, so the pet can move about and not have to be what they feel like is a skating rink on like hardwood floor for elderly pets.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think when somebody, and this is Alicia, and this is probably a tougher question for you. She said she, and I know Alicia very well. She recently put down a pet, and she had two, and this will tie into another question. And she herself personally is having a difficult time. She's feeling a little detached from her current dog because she lost the other dog, and I think that's just a form of grieving. But have you heard, or any is that normal? I guess I think Alicia's trying to figure out if that's a normal feeling, because she's all of a sudden not feeling that same attachment to the other dog she has.
I mean, I think that's a form of grieving, and each person grieves a little bit differently, and none of those feelings are wrong. It's hard to sometimes be happy when the other pet's around, because you feel sad or you feel guilty feeling happy. I think it takes time, and if it's taking a lot of effort to where you're getting into a depression state, I think talking to a therapist or something is really great, because they might be able to hone in on what you might need to do, versus just other pet owners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Jen mentioned there's a social worker maybe that helps with grief at Buffalo Grove, so that's something to consider.
Yeah, so Vet Specialty Center has excellent services, and there's also a therapist, Joy Davy, who actually I think works with Hinsdale Crematory in Willowbrook, who we use. He does that type of work too. So yeah, both I recommend highly. I think that really helps to know that you're not alone and to find some ways to cope.
Right. So that brings to Deb had a really good question about involving the other dogs in, like if you have multiple dogs, like if you have to let one go, do you have the other dogs there? Do you don't? Do you find that that's, I think it really depends on the dog and the dynamics of that particular situation. But what do you encourage that? Do you allow that when you're doing your work?
I encourage the pets to be there unless they're a puppy and just can't calm down and they're trying to do puppy things, or they're barkers and don't like strangers in the house, and they're going to disrupt the process. Things like that. They can always see the pet afterwards, those pets. But I encourage all the pets to be there that want to be there. Some will be in another room and don't want to be there. Some might be hyper to see a new person, but then calm down and realize it's a somber event. And some people comment how so-and-so doesn't stay quiet when someone's here. But dogs by instinct and animals, they know when the other one's sick. And you'll see sometimes them treating them differently, either in a good way mostly or sometimes a bad way. But they also know what death is by instinct. And many times I find that the other dogs don't seem to react like we would think, like we would react to a deceased friend. Sometimes they sniff and then they wag their tail looking at you like, okay, what now? And we think that they don't know what they're doing, but that's just how they process it. I've also had pets who, once the one passes, won't look at that pet at all. So you have to know that they know what has happened. So I definitely encourage it, unless the dog's being disruptive or someone doesn't want them there for some reason. I've never had any have a bad experience from it. I think it also helps them know the other one's not coming back, especially if they're in another room. But some dogs will look for the other dog after they are deceased, and you can't explain it to them. They'll wait by their favorite spot for them for months. I just think it helps them transition. That's what they need.
Yeah, actually, I had that happen with my with a dog that I had to take. He died at the vet, and my one dog, which I didn't expect, was looking for him and kept going to his spot and kept looking for him. And I'm like, I didn't think they were that buddy. You know, they were that close, but she very clearly, felt his presence, and it was really interesting because they didn't seem like to hang out or anything when they were alive. They would just be around, but they would never like hang out and play and anything like that.
I think they're still in the same family, so even if they're not close, that's still their family.
Right. It was very interesting. Yeah, it was very interesting how she missed them. I'm like, okay,
So Mary has a question that actually leads into a question that I had. She wants to know, is it common to have clients change their mind once they set a date? And for me, I kind of, it plays into you're doing hospice care now, right? So kind of like people, they kind of get that rally before the end. Do you see that in dogs as well, where, we know it's time, and then they have those 2 super great days before they have a really terrible day?
Well, I do see a lot where they perked up that day or the day before, and so it made the person think that maybe it wasn't time. But once I tell them, I see that a lot, and even with people, it happens. They'll feel better. But I get a lot of people that do schedule, then change their mind that day, and that's all okay, because I never want to euthanize a pet where the people don't feel it's right or they're ready. So sometimes it happens a lot with a certain person, and sometimes it's just, oh, the pet wasn't eating for 3 days and now it just gobbled down food. Let's see what happens. And maybe we don't hear from them for months, or maybe it's just a few days and the pet's down again. So we all are able to handle that. Sometimes I wake up and my schedule is completely different than it was the night before. So yeah, that's actually common.
Okay.
Well, that almost happened to me with Kaiser. I woke up and he was all perky in the morning, and I had scheduled for them to come, and he was all perky, and I'm like, oh, maybe maybe it's not time. And then I came out of the shower and he was like, And then I knew, I was like, no, it's time.
Yeah, it's a strange phenomenon. A bunch of us vets were discussing on, I think, Facebook, what we thought of that, and some thought it was maybe a chemical reaction that occurs, in the brain. I kind of thought that maybe subconsciously their soul knows they're going home, and it's exciting for them. And I think dogs see more than we can see on this level.
Yeah.
I know I'm getting into weird things. For some people might not believe that, and that's fine. But I think dogs don't fear death. I think they can see beyond and know they're going to be okay, and know that they'll see us again. And yeah, that's kind of what I take it to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That dogs have dogs know, like other dogs in the house know when one dog it's going to transition. I mean, it's just a lot of interest, but you see that with people too.
You see, like, that's knowing when at an elderly facility, when the next person's going to die because the cat's on their lap, and
Right.
I know usually that person is close to death, so they don't mind. But they're just amazing.
Yeah, because it is because it happens with people too, which is very interesting.
Yep. Yeah. So on a sort of different topic, I know I had one who she lost her mobility, right? And 3 weeks of constant vet visits, and what else can we do? Nothing. We would have done it already. So, it was time to make the decision. And her favorite thing in the whole wide world was food, right? And so we went to Steak and Shake, and she got as many cheeseburgers as she could eat, and a vanilla shake. And I think a lot of people sometimes do the special meal or whatever. Does that have any impact on what you're giving them or anything like that on the end?
Not with what I'm doing with my sedatives, and other vets might use different sedatives. But unless the pets already have been vomiting, then they may sometimes vomit with the sedative, or if they have a strange reaction to it, which happened maybe twice I can think of, where they weren't vomiting beforehand, ate, and then they threw that up. But otherwise, I encourage different meals and things like that. Some people tell me they just fed their dog a filet mignon and other fun stuff. So sometimes it's, McDonald's, that seems to be a favorite with dogs. So
Yeah.
Okay. So good to know there's no side effects on that. That's
So Kari, now this is just on another how have you been handling the COVID with all this? You're actually going to people's homes and stuff, so it's got to be a little more stressful for you as for them to have you come out. So how have you been handling that situation
In the beginning, it was a little bit more scary. We had a lot more PPE where we, kind of put covers over our shoes and wore gloves and wore goggles and sanitize everything. Now I feel, we sanitize like our hands and everything, but wearing masks and having all the people wear masks is what we require. We also do a little screening, like, some people tell us, okay, well, I just was encountered with someone with COVID, and, if it's really not safe for us to do that, then we'll decline, which makes us kind of sad that we have to, but we have to think of our health first, or else we can't help anyone else. So mainly the masks, and we used to get a lot of resistance from that early on, and now most people will do that for us, and if they don't, then we can't go in. So that's a requirement, and we just hand sanitize a lot, and it's been okay so far with all of our doctors.
Yeah, that's right, because I was just thinking, it's like, well, that's got to be tough. But I think,
I was going to say a lot of animal hospitals still are doing the curbside, and they're only letting maybe one person in for euthanasia. And so that's tough on a lot of families. So that's also why they're turning to us
for help. Yeah. My my cat only likes to be on me when I'm on Facebook. When
Yeah, of course, when you're busy.
He's just letting you know he's going to be around for a long time.
yeah,
Yeah, see, animals know.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's gonna be 14, so he's a busy guy. Anyway,
So
go ahead, Joanne.
Roger was asking, is there anything that you recommend to people to get ready? Like a couple days before, that day, anything that would helps them get through the process?
Kind of depends on what's going on with the pet and if you have that time or if it's sudden or things like that. Some people have their family or friends around. Like today, I had to euthanize a 17-year-old dog, and he actually had lost his partner to COVID recently. So now he's losing the dog they shared together for 17 years. And so he had friends over, and they lit candles and had soft music playing, and he held him all morning, and they laughed and cried, and he said that went exactly how he wanted it to go. And I think having that picture in your head, if you're able to, we will try to do everything we can to make that happen. We're just behind the scenes. We want to do whatever you need us to do to help make this as an experience that you feel is right for your pet. Some people, want it over with quickly, and some people give their dogs a bucket list where they decide to go several places over the week and all the things the dog loved, and they're able to do that. But those are things where you might not have that time to do, or the pet might be nauseous, so you can't give them their food that they love, or certain things like that. But and one thing I just want to say as far as people is guilt is a really huge emotion associated with this, because to euthanize someone you love is not natural. Although I do have people say I wish their family member could have went this way because of how peaceful it was. But people have a lot of guilt, and I realized I had guilt too, and I talk to people about not having guilt. So I realize it's just an emotion that we all pretty much will have. But the important thing is to recognize you have it and not to second guess yourself, because in that time you thought it was the best for your pet, and it probably was. It most likely was. And even though I know better, I felt guilty, and I had to just kind of shake that off and kind of move on from that, because it's just a damaging emotion. That may be why some people are stuck. They feel guilty because maybe, they think they killed their pet, but no, the disease process caused their pet to decline, and we just help them pass without suffering.
Right. Because I think that's true. I think people, it's like they feel bad, like, and I think Alicia mentioned it earlier, where she goes, "You're playing God. You're not. It's a gift that we can give our dogs, that peaceful transition that we cannot do for people. Some people suffer a long time before they pass on their own, and you just gotta let them. Our dogs don't have to go through that. We can help them transition in a nice, peaceful way. And like you said, they're just not, it's a gift really that we can make we can help them through that, because it's hard when, I've seen people suffer so long and there's nothing you can do, just let them go through it, versus a dog. We cannot have that happen to them. So
some people want a natural death and they don't want to have to make the decision, but as they watch their pet slowly decline, not eating, not drinking, getting dehydrated, moaning, they realize that this is an awful way to go, and they call us in, and we're able to help them.
Yeah, because
Well, and I think that's one of the harder things. Some people who don't want to make that decision, right? When the human gets to there, they're in hospice care. They have IVs, and they are fed, and their basic needs are taken care of, and we just don't have that, in the animal world.
Yeah.
And then would you want to anyway, like
Right.
Right.
keeping the animal alive because
Right.
Mhm.
uh not, but it's out of love that you make that decision, really, because it's really, if you
It is.
really love them, you don't want them to suffer. So
Yeah,
for
you're
sure.
not doing this because you're sick of them or sick of the cleanup or whatever. So you have
Yeah.
to remember why you made the decision in the first place and know that it's the disease that's causing this, not you.
Right. So you had mentioned some online rough people that can help people with the grieving, because I think that's the other thing that we don't have a lot of. The rest of the, and I know this is going to sound terrible, but the rest of the people who don't have dogs or live with dogs the way they do, they just don't understand how you can, why you're grieving so much over a dog. It's just a dog. It's
Right.
just a cat. And they just don't get it. So it's very difficult for us to be in the world and, have this horrible loss of this animal, and other people, unless you're around other people, they don't, people don't understand. And I can speak for, I know Tom and Aaron just lost a dog. And what they did is they came to class with the other dogs. They came to be around people who understand how they felt, right? So they recognized that that's what they needed. Yes, they were sad, and yes, they missed the other dog, but they were around support. They came to their support system
Mhm.
to be able to get through that grieving process of
Yes.
losing that pet. But some people don't have that option, so it's like, what are some of the online people that you recommend? I know you said Joy. What was the name of the person?
Joy
Joy.
Davies. There's a list of them on my website on peacefulendings.net.
And I put
There's
that in the net.
free resources, and there's a list. And if a link is bad or something, let me know. But last time I checked, they were okay. But yeah, definitely reaching out if you need it to people who do understand.
Mm-hmm. Because that's, I think, when I was in corporate and I lost a dog, it was hard to tell people how sad I was or whatever, or that I needed
Time off, they're not going to think it's necessary.
right.
Where
Right.
when my dog passed suddenly, I was in bed for like a week, but I own my own business, so I didn't have to talk to anyone. But not everyone has that luxury.
Right. And actually, this is the other thing. Having other pets does help some, because I did have quite a reaction to one of my other pets passing, and I was laying on the couch for a day, or two. But my other dogs needed me, and they needed my attention, and they needed me. So
Exactly. They needed to go outside. That's why you get up, is to take care of them and feed them, and that's what gets you going.
Right.
Yeah. So these two kind of go together. Actually, Marilyn was asking, how do you deal with the guilt that comes along with grief if your pet dies, at the vet when you were not able to be with them? And Katie also sort of responded to that. COVID has really made it difficult. She had to say goodbye to her dog in the parking lot and didn't even get to go in. So, is it truly? I mean, you might feel guilty, but there's nothing to feel guilty about. They don't let you stay there for a reason, right? They have a job to do in the vet clinic and that sort of thing. So, any comments about, people losing pets, where they just have declined so much, they have to make a decision without the owner?
Some pets where you take them to the vet and they find out they're very, very critical and close to death, and maybe you can't take them home. Maybe every time they're out of an oxygen tank, they start to, breathe heavy because they're not getting enough in their lungs. And so they have to euthanize their pet at the clinic versus home, because otherwise their pet would kind of suffocate to death. And that's horrible. So there may be some situations like that, but if it warrants it, that means the disease was really bad. And it's not your fault. It's just what happens. Sometimes pet issues happen in our minds quickly. Like they were fine a week ago, now they're near death. And that's just how it goes. I don't know if it's because dogs don't live as long as people and it speeds things up for them, or they just don't tell us when they have a sore, if their stomach's been aching a little bit for the past month, they can't really express that. So we find it later on in the disease course process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's nothing that, and you want to do everything you can to help your pet, but sometimes there's not much you can do. And and this goes, like you said, about things that it's like, though that pet was there for this long of a time, for this time in your life for a reason, and it's time for them to go. They've probably done what they've needed to do with you. And you need to let them go instead of trying to hold on, because it's hard to just
Super hard.
Well, and I think you'd have to, even though you weren't there and you don't know the people, right? I think you have to take comfort that these vets and this staff, I mean, they take beatings every day, and it's not easy, and they do this because they truly love the animals, right? So
I've never seen any staff that don't love them and be there for them when they're in that situation. So they will love your pet.
And dogs too, right? At least they're comforted by someone, even though it couldn't be you.
Yes, someone that understands dogs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's and all of us process grief differently, and from being in the dog world a long time, some of us have a more difficult time, but they also have just other things too that are contributing to that inability to deal with that particular grief. Because while it's just because I get to see people who never get over the death of a dog, which is hard, and people who can grieve it, process it, and then move on. You still miss the dog, and you still love the dog, and there'll always be a part of you, always, but you can continue to live on. But we see that with people too, right? If somebody dies or whatever, they just can't process that grief, and it just takes them down because they can't process that situation. So
some people that I see, they've had dogs their whole lives and went through multiple deaths already, so they're more in tune spiritually than the crying and everything. They kind of know what's going to happen, and they know how to do it, and they know how to get through it, and doesn't make them any less sad, but they just kind of they've been through it before.
Right. Yeah, and Kate, you are right. There's a lot of people that have said, actually, some student of mine said that they felt guilt because they felt worse about losing their dog than they did their parent.
I hear that a lot too. But you see the dog every day, and even if you're late, the dog loves you when you get home. Even if you're crabby, the dog loves you. So it's hard, but guilt, just get the guilt away. I felt it too, so I know everyone must feel it. And I can't imagine someone who is brand new to this that feels that guilt and the horrible feeling it gives them. If I could just take it away, I would.
Yeah. So go ahead, Joanne, if you had a question, because I had another one.
Well, that's okay. I was just going to say, not to get too weird on this, right? But like, people believe in different things. So I know we talked about, sort of grief counseling and the social worker. They also have kind of the animal communicators that sometimes can do that, whether or not you believe in that. Like, what are some other maybe non-conventional things that you've seen people do to kind of help with grief?
Yeah, I have had the communicators. People tell me that it's time for their pets through the communicator. I've had people, I don't know what type of religion it was, but they had to keep the pet or the deceased, and they do it with people too, at home for like 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them do chanting. They're praying. Maybe it's a different language. They're doing all sorts of rituals because they're treating this pet as a human when it passes, and they believe in certain things that need to be done for the soul to move on. And so, yeah, we've probably seen it all through the 3 vets that work at peaceful endings.
Mm. Well, I know my friends in Japan, they do the wake and the whole celebration, and they do
Mhm.
a whole different process than we do here when their pet passes. It's a
Yeah, I
different.
think it's interesting. I just, like to see how different cultures handle it, and everything's fine. However you want it to do is fine. We're just in the background, and we just want to help you.
Mhm. So when you've gone to, have you personally had to go? Have you ever gone to the house and you told the person that the dog wasn't ready? Has that ever
I had
happened?
a dog with a vaginal discharge, and she didn't realize that it was most likely a pyometra, which is an infection of the uterus, and pus was coming out. And I told her that it was likely this. We'd have to do tests to confirm, and likely surgery would be needed, but most dogs are fine afterwards. And it was hard because they already made the decision. But, I even got on the phone with the emergency vet and discussed it with them and set them up, and they went and had it. It was a pyometra. The dog successfully got through the surgery, and then they called us 4 years later because now it was time for their dog. So they were
Wow!
time.
Wow!
Yeah. But that's a rare situation.
Yeah.
Most people know it's time. It might not be how I would probably wait maybe longer than them, but this is their decision. There's no, based on their experiences. So I can't really say they're wrong. It's just different than what I would do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
someone's euthanizing their pet because they're moving or somewhere. We don't do that. And we have a high bar for dogs with behavioral problems because we want to make sure they tried everything first and there's no success. It just doesn't, for me, it didn't make me feel fulfilled and felt like I helped if I euthanized a healthy dog for a behavior issue, if I didn't know they didn't do everything.
That they could have to make that work. Yeah. I think somebody mentioned about Anya. She said there was a 15-year-old dog that was euthanized because there was a tumor, but she didn't know what kind, and she feels bad putting her down because she wasn't sure if it was operable, but she was 15.
Well, but the tumor ruptured, so that's yeah.
Well, let's say you successfully operate on a pet that old. Maybe 2 weeks later, it just happens to come down with kidney failure because it's age, or it happens to get another cancer or heart failure. So there's always that risk on older pets. And some just, older pets are a little bit more risky for procedures like that. And a 15-year-old dog is a pretty old dog. So those types of situations and and decisions have to come into factor. One person had a cat with a brain tumor who was 18 years old. They actually did do the surgery. The cat lived till like 23, but I don't know if I would have done it, with a cat that's 18. I think that's a rare situation to have that happen, but
Wow.
And unfortunately, finances come into it. We're not all rich, and some of these procedures can cost $5,000 or more. So it's unfortunately a factor.
So Roger asked if you do home visits to determine if the time is right, but you do that. You do a hospice.
We do that. We do hospice where I do the records, and maybe that's not their time yet, and they know that. They just want to do everything possible that make the pet feel good and
Comfortable
until it's their time. So that might mean medications or arranging furniture, or maybe I say, it's not going to be long, and they have to come to terms with this. Or I say, watch for breathing getting worse because that may mean the cancer has gone to the lungs, and that's what usually happens with this type of cancer. And they'll count respirations every day. So things like that.
All right. Well, I know this was a difficult subject to discuss and chat about, but I think was necessary, especially those of us who are in the dog sport world, and that we spend a lot of time. And I think there's not enough out there about this particular subject, and the doctor, like Dr. Trotsky and Dr. Whalen and some of the other that are doing this really difficult work, is so glad that we have this option now, because before this was not an option for dogs. So we're really glad that we have people like you that are willing to do it, because it's so much the difference when you have somebody come to your home and help your dog or your animal transition at home. It's so much so wonderful, and you just feel so good. At as sad as that event is, it gives
Your pet is
you
prepared, your pet is comfortable, your pet is in familiar surroundings. And I just want to add at the end that, just for people who don't know just the process, usually when we get there, we give a sedative to the pet, so where they get drowsy, fall asleep, and then fall into a deep sleep where they're not able to feel anything or be aware. And then we give the next one, usually in a vein, one of the leg veins, and then they pass from there. And we could take the pet afterwards, if desired, to arrange cremation, whether you get ashes or not. So you could contact me for more details if you're going to encounter this soon. But I just wanted to give that brief outline of what we do when we come to the home for one of these situations.
Well, thank you, Dr. Trotsky, and thank you all for tuning in. I just wanted, like I said, this was a difficult topic, but I think you did a great job of helping us through it and getting just that additional information. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
And then I put the link for Dr. Trotsky's business, peacefulendings.net. I put it in the notes, so you should be able to click on that and get to our website to get in touch with her if you need to.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.